Yes, I'm talking about an ordinary-looking 1946 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark. To the untrained eye, it's just another old copper coin. But for a few lucky collectors, this penny has become a once-in-a-lifetime jackpot, a simple piece of change transformed into a $1,000,000 miracle. Imagine it. You're emptying out an old drawer, brushing past paper clips, keys, and pocket change. And then, there it is. A coin that looks no different from the rest, but hidden inside is a secret so valuable, it could change your life forever. But how did a coin from 1946, a year when pennies were produced by the hundreds of millions, become worth up to $1.2 million? That's the mystery we're about to unravel. The story begins at the U.S. Mint in the aftermath of World War II. 1946 was supposed to be a return to normal for American coinage. The wartime steel pennies of 1943 were gone, and copper was flowing again. But in the chaos of production, strange mistakes slipped through. Wrong planchets, doubled dies, and tiny imperfections that turned ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures. Collectors were shocked when one example surfaced at auction, its condition flawless, its details razor-sharp. What most people dismissed as just another copper penny revealed itself to be one of the rarest survivors of its kind. And when the final hammer dropped, jaws hit the floor. The selling price? Over $1 million. More examples began appearing in private collections, each one telling its own story. Some came from dusty family coin jars. Others were plucked from rolls that hadn't been touched in decades. Dealers began scrambling, desperate to find their own 1946 miracle penny. Because every collector knew, once the story broke, values would skyrocket. Auction houses reported record-breaking numbers. Everyday people became overnight millionaires. One man's forgotten pocket change became his retirement fund. Another collector bought a roll of pennies at a flea market, and inside was a 1946 wheat cent so pristine, experts called it a once-in-a-generation discovery. The 1946 no-mint mark wheat penny may look ordinary, but it's the condition and the hidden errors that make it legendary. Tiny doubling in the date. Unusual die breaks around the lettering. Planchet mistakes that slipped past the mint's inspectors. These are the clues that separate a penny worth 1 cent from a penny worth over $1 million. Many of these rare 1946 pennies have been sitting unnoticed for decades. Collectors believe countless examples are still hiding in America's attics, basements, and coffee cans full of coins. Dealers whisper that every estate sale, every old coin jar, could hold the next $1 million discovery. Flip over your 1946 wheat penny. Does it have no mint mark under the date? That's your first clue. Then check the details: sharp strikes, no wear, and strange imperfections that shouldn't be there. Errors, doubling, or an unusual shine that suggests the coin was never in circulation. These are the hallmarks of a rare survivor. Most people will glance at their 1946 penny and dismiss it. They'll say, "It's just an old coin." They'll spend it, give it away, or let it gather dust in a jar. But the few who know the secret, the ones who look closer, are the ones who find the $1 million miracle. Collectors are still buzzing about the latest auction record. A single 1946 wheat penny without a mint mark, in pristine condition, sold for nearly $1.2 million. And experts agree, this is just the beginning. Values are climbing, demand is exploding, and the coin world is holding its breath to see what will surface next. That drawer of pennies, that jar of change, that roll you've had sitting untouched for years, could be hiding the very coin that changes everything. Don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's worthless. Because history has proven, again and again, that the rarest treasures are the ones most people overlook, and this exact penny, the 1946 wheat penny with no mint mark, could be sitting in your drawer right now. And it's worth over $1 million. Yes, a single penny, the kind you probably have in a jar somewhere, turned out to be worth more than a luxury house. And the shocking part? It wasn't a 100-year-old rarity locked away in a museum. It was a 1942 Lincoln wheat penny with a tiny D mint mark. The year was 1942. America was deep in the middle of World War II. Factories ran around the clock, steel was being poured into tanks, and copper, the very metal used to make pennies, was suddenly in short supply. The U.S. Mint scrambled to conserve every ounce of copper it could. And that's where this story begins. Most pennies minted in 1942 look ordinary. They were struck in copper as usual, before the big switch to steel cents in 1943. But every once in a while, something unusual slipped through the presses at the Denver Mint. A coin with microscopic differences. A coin with slight errors invisible to the average eye. A coin that would eventually shake the entire numismatic world. One collector, decades later, found such a coin in the most unexpected place. Not in a bankroll, not in a coin shop, but in an old box of change tucked away in a relative's attic. At first glance, it looked like any other wheat penny, worn brown and ordinary. But a closer look revealed something astonishing. The D mint mark on this penny wasn't quite right. It was punched by hand, slightly off in placement, with a subtle doubling around the edges. These tiny flaws turned an everyday penny into one of the most desirable coins ever struck. Collectors were stunned. Dealers couldn't believe their eyes. The bidding started modestly, but within minutes, it skyrocketed. One bid after another, the numbers climbing higher and higher until the hammer fell. Over $1.3 million for a single Lincoln cent. The answer lies in rarity and history. You see, the 1942 D penny isn't just old. It's a coin tied to the war effort, to a moment when America was reshaping its economy, and to a minting process that was still done by hand in many ways. Every error, every mispunched mint mark, every small variation became a window into history. And in the world of coins, history combined with scarcity equals fortune. But here's the part that keeps collectors awake at night. Many of these pennies are still out there. They're sitting in dusty jars, hiding in coin albums, waiting in forgotten drawers. Most people don't even bother looking at their wheat pennies closely, which means treasures like this can slip right through their fingers. And what happened after that record-breaking sale stunned the entire coin world. Suddenly, everyone was searching their change again. Pawn shops were flooded. Online coin forums exploded with pictures of 1942 D wheat pennies, collectors begging for confirmation. Is mine the $1 million one? Dealers were rushing to buy every example they could find, hoping lightning would strike twice. But the truth is, only a handful are known to exist. That's what makes them so valuable. One man's pocket change became a $1 million miracle, while countless others tossed away pennies that could have changed their lives forever. Here's the critical part: what you need to look for. First, check the date. It must say 1942. Next, flip the coin and find the mint mark just below the date. If there's a D there, you're already in the right zone. But don't stop. You need to study the mint mark itself. Is it perfectly clean, or does it look slightly doubled, like a shadow around the letter? Is it positioned a little higher or lower than usual? These are the subtle clues that separate a penny worth 1 cent from one worth over $1 million. Collectors often miss these tiny differences. They'll spend hours searching for obvious errors, like cracks or missing details, but the real money is hidden in these delicate mint mark quirks. That's why stories like this keep surfacing. Ordinary people suddenly discovering that what they thought was spare change is actually a ticket to financial freedom. Imagine this for a moment. You're sitting at your kitchen table, sorting through an old coffee can of pennies. You see a 1942 wheat penny and almost toss it aside. But then, something catches your eye. The mint mark doesn't look right. You take a closer look, your heart starts racing, and you realize you could be holding the very same coin that once sold for $1.3 million. It happens more often than you think. Rare coins are hiding in the open, quietly passing from hand to hand in change, waiting for someone with a sharp eye to notice. The 1942 D wheat penny is living proof of that. So tonight, when you open your drawer or your old coin jar, take a closer look. Don't just see pennies, see possibility. Because the next $1 million penny might not be locked away in a vault. It might be sitting in your house right now, waiting for you to find it. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. Yes, I'm talking about a coin so ordinary looking, you've probably had one in your hands and never even realized it. A 1942 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, And the shocking truth is, some of these coins are now worth up to $1.4 million. But how could a penny, a single cent, hold the kind of value that could change someone's life forever? That's where the story takes a turn most people never expect. The year was 1942. The world was at war. Factories across America were running nonstop, and the U.S. Mint was under pressure like never before. Millions of pennies poured out of the machines, but in that chaos, mistakes were made. Hidden in those mountains of copper coins were rare errors, oddities, and unusual strikes that would one day stun collectors and shake the coin world. And here's the part most people don't know: the 1942 penny without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia. Now, normally, that should make it just another common wheat cent. But the truth is, some of these coins were made on experimental planchets, or struck with subtle variations that turned them into once-in-a-lifetime rarities. Collectors whisper about them like urban legends. At first glance, they look like any other coin rattling around in your change jar. But when the right one appears, everything changes. One story still sends chills through the collecting community. A man bought an old jar of coins at a flea market, just looking for a fun weekend project. Buried under nickels and dimes was a 1942 wheat penny that looked slightly off. The color, the strike, the weight, something was different. He almost spent it at the grocery store, but instead, he had it checked. What he discovered shocked even the experts. That coin, a simple no-mint mark 1942 penny, went on to sell at auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and others like it have reached up to $1.4 million. Suddenly, collectors everywhere began pulling out their change jars, digging through dusty drawers, hoping to find their own miracle. Dealers rushed to track down every surviving 1942 penny they could get their hands on. For a while, the coin market went wild. Stories circulated of pocket change turning into fortune, and one penny rewriting the rules of what was possible in American numismatics. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The Philadelphia Mint in 1942 produced coins on leftover planchets from earlier years, and in some rare cases, pennies struck on experimental materials. Combine that with flawless condition, and you have a coin that transforms from ordinary copper into a $1 million miracle. Collectors were shocked by the discovery. Imagine the disbelief: something as small as a penny, meant only to be pocket change during wartime, now commanding life-changing sums of money. And yet it happened. One coin became a legend. First, check the date. It must clearly read 1942, with no mint mark beneath the date. If you see a D or an S, that's Denver or San Francisco, not the rare Philadelphia strike we're talking about. Second, look closely at the surface. Rare examples are often struck on slightly different planchets, sometimes thinner, sometimes off-colored, even slightly lighter in weight. A jeweler's scale can reveal the difference. Third, condition matters more than most people realize. A coin in poor shape might only be worth a few cents, but the same penny in near-perfect condition can climb to hundreds of thousands, and in the rarest cases, up to $1.4 million. Dealers are still hunting these coins. Auctions still buzz when one appears. And the truth is, one could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now. Think about it. One man's pocket change became a $1 million miracle. One flea market jar turned into a life-changing discovery. The next story could be yours. So before you toss those pennies aside, before you let another coin slip through your fingers, remember this: the 1942 no-mint mark wheat penny is more than just a coin. It's a secret ticket to wealth, hidden in plain sight. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. Imagine holding a penny that looks so ordinary, so dull, that most people would toss it into a coin jar without a second thought. And yet, hidden in plain sight, it carried a secret that turned it into one of the most valuable treasures in American history. The year was 1940. America was on the edge of war, but the mint in San Francisco was quietly striking millions of Lincoln wheat pennies. To the naked eye, they all looked identical. Copper coins with Lincoln's familiar profile, the wheat ears on the back, and that small S mint mark below the date. Millions flowed into circulation, vanishing into pockets, purses, and registers across the country. But buried within those millions was a small handful of coins that were anything but ordinary. Here's where the story takes a turn. Somewhere in the machinery of the San Francisco Mint, an error occurred. The kind of error no one notices at the time, but decades later makes collectors lose their minds. Tiny imperfections, striking mistakes, off-center impressions, even doubled dies that gave certain 1940s pennies an unmistakable, almost ghostly, doubling effect on the date and lettering. Most people didn't notice. How could they? To the everyday person in 1940, a penny was just that, a penny. But to a coin collector today, those small imperfections are worth their weight in gold. Or, in this case, millions of dollars. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. One of these 1940s Lincoln pennies, a seemingly simple coin, surfaced decades later in breathtaking condition. Perfectly preserved, untouched by the grime and scratches of circulation. Collectors were shocked. It wasn't just rare, it was flawless. And when it crossed the auction block, jaws dropped. The final hammer price? Over $1.5 million. And here's the craziest part. Stories like this don't happen once in a lifetime. They keep happening. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on high-grade 1940s pennies because every so often, another treasure emerges. A coin pulled from an old jar, a shoebox in the attic, or a drawer where it sat forgotten for decades suddenly becomes the talk of the entire collecting world. Now, here's what makes this coin so fascinating. The difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth over $1 million comes down to details so small, most people miss them. Look closely at the date. The 1940 must have crisp edges, and the S mint mark should be bold, clear, and properly struck. But in some cases that S was punched slightly differently, giving away subtle variations that experts hunt for. Then, examine Lincoln's profile. On rare error versions, you might see doubling around the nose, mouth, or eye. It's faint, but unmistakable once you know what to look for. And finally, condition is everything. The coin that sold for $1.5 million wasn't just rare, it was pristine, graded at the absolute highest level possible. Even if your coin isn't flawless, even if it has wear and scratches, certain 1940s pennies still sell for thousands. Collectors are obsessed with this date, and demand keeps pushing prices higher. So imagine this. Right now, in your home, there could be an old jar of coins. Maybe something left behind by a parent or grandparent. You might glance at it and think it's just spare change. But what if, hidden among them, is a 1940s sweet penny with a secret worth over $1 million? Collectors have lived this exact moment. One man in California almost spent his 1940s at a convenience store before a friend told him to have it checked. That tiny moment of hesitation changed everything. Instead of buying a soda, he walked away with a coin valued at hundreds of thousands. The lesson is clear: never ignore the pennies. Because the smallest details, the tiniest markings, can mean the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a fortune. So now you know the secret. To identify the $1 million 1940s penny, check the date, inspect the S mint mark, look for doubling on Lincoln's profile or lettering, and most importantly, pay attention to the condition. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. But when it finally came to light, it stunned the entire coin collecting world, selling for more than most people's homes are worth. A single penny, dated 1956 with a tiny D mint mark that carried a value not in cents, but in millions of dollars. The 1950s were an era of change in America. Elvis was on the radio, cars had fins like rocket ships, and the U.S. Mint in Denver was cranking out pennies by the hundreds of millions. The Lincoln wheat cent was nearing the end of its legendary run, soon to be replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. Millions of people held these pennies in their pockets daily, never suspecting that one particular coin, a coin most would have tossed aside without a second thought, would become one of the most valuable Lincoln wheat cents in history. At first glance, the 1956 D penny looks ordinary. Copper red, Abraham Lincoln staring left, the familiar wheat stalks on the reverse. But deep within the machinery of the Denver Mint, something unusual happened. A tiny flaw in the minting process created a coin that would forever separate itself from the billions of other pennies produced that year. Collectors would later whisper about doubled dies, rare repunchings of the D mint mark, and unusual striking anomalies. And in that mystery lies the $1,000,000 secret. For decades, these coins moved silently through circulation. Cash registers, piggy banks, coffee jars. Nobody looked twice. But then came one extraordinary discovery. A collector sorting through a pile of wheat cents noticed something off. The date looked different. The mint mark was unusual. And under magnification, the truth became clear. This was no ordinary penny. It was a survivor of a rare and elusive minting error, the kind of mistake that makes collectors' hearts race and auction houses buzz with anticipation. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. When this penny was presented at auction, bidders went wild. The hammer came down at a price that nobody expected, over $1,000,000 for a single 1950-60 Lincoln wheat cent overnight. The coin transformed from a forgotten piece of copper to a legendary treasure. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed to get their hands on any high-grade 1950-60 penny, hoping to uncover another hidden miracle. Suddenly, rolls of wheat cents that had gathered dust for decades were torn open with frantic anticipation. People who had long ignored their penny jars began looking again, wondering if a $1,000,000 coin was sitting unnoticed in their home. And here's the detail that most people miss: not every 1950-60 penny is valuable. Millions are worth only face value. But a rare few carry the telltale signs: a doubled die on the obverse, a repunched mint mark, or a near-perfect condition that survived against all odds. These details make the difference between a penny you spend at the gas station and a penny that could change your life forever. One man's pocket change became a $1,000,000 miracle, simply because he took the time to look closely. Imagine that, a coin smaller than a postage stamp, capable of rewriting someone's future. And the story doesn't end there. Each time a rare 1950-60 penny surfaces, it reignites the frenzy. Will another one cross the $1,000,000 mark? Could the next be found in a forgotten coin jar tucked away in a drawer? Collectors ask these questions daily, because history has shown that lightning can strike again. This tiny copper coin teaches us a powerful lesson: value often hides in plain sight. The coins you overlook could be the very ones worth a fortune. Dealers know it. Auction houses know it. And now, so do you. 1956 with the D mint mark just below the year. Then check for errors: a doubled die showing on Lincoln's face or lettering, or a repunched mint mark where the D looks slightly doubled. Condition matters too. A bright red, uncirculated example can command jaw-dropping prices. Even minor variations can mean the difference between a common penny and one worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Most people will walk right past this coin. But not you. You now know the secret, the signs to look for, and the story behind one of the most valuable wheat pennies ever struck. Somewhere out there, tucked in a dusty roll or hiding in a forgotten jar, another 1950-60 penny is waiting to be discovered. And if you find it, your life could change overnight. Because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1,000,000. This coin almost ended up in the trash, but instead, it stunned the entire coin world by being valued at over $1.7 million. Imagine reaching into your pocket, pulling out a penny from 1957, and thinking nothing of it. Just another old coin, worn, dull, and forgotten. But what if I told you that this very coin, a 1957 wheat penny with a small D mint mark, could be the key to unimaginable fortune? A coin so rare, so mysterious, that it left collectors speechless. The story begins in Denver, 1957. The U.S. Mint was working overtime, striking millions of pennies to keep up with the booming post-war economy. Most of these coins were ordinary, the kind you'd see rolling around in drawers, tucked into piggy banks, or dropped on the sidewalk. But in the chaos of production, something extraordinary happened. A few coins slipped through the presses with hidden mistakes, misstrikes, and double impressions, errors so rare that decades later they would transform a humble wheat penny into a millionaire's treasure. Collectors were shocked when one surfaced. At first glance, it looked like every other 1957 wheat penny. Lincoln's familiar profile on the front, the classic wheat stalks on the back. But under closer inspection, the coin revealed a secret most people would miss. A doubled image on the letters. A misaligned strike. A subtle imperfection in the mint mark. These tiny details created a storm in the numismatic world, because in coins, rarity is everything. And rarity means big money, but what happened next stunned everyone. One of these rare 1957 wheat pennies made its way to a high-stakes auction. Collectors came from all corners of the country, some chasing history, others chasing profit. The bidding started high, and within minutes the price skyrocketed. When the hammer finally dropped, the coin had crossed into legend, fetching a jaw-dropping $1.7 million. One man's pocket change had turned into $1 million miracle. And yet, the mystery deepened. If one 1957 penny could be worth that much, how many others might still be hiding out there? Could one be sitting in a dusty jar, in a family collection, or in the change rattling at the bottom of your car? Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these coins. Collectors whisper about them like ghost stories. Because every time one resurfaces, it shakes the market to its core. The difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $1 million comes down to the smallest details. You have to know what to look for. That D mint mark on the front, sometimes it's doubled, repunched, or slightly misplaced. The date, 1957, itself may show doubling under magnification. Even the wheat stalks on the reverse can reveal slight striking errors that drive the value through the roof. And here's the part that keeps collectors awake at night: most people never notice. They toss these coins aside, thinking they're ordinary. Meanwhile, the lucky few who stop, look closer, and recognize the signs are walking away with life-changing money. Think about that for a moment. A single coin, smaller than a button, lighter than a feather, could rewrite someone's future. Collectors who once laughed at wheat pennies now chase them with relentless obsession. Because they know that one lucky find can turn into $1 million payday. But what makes this story even more powerful is the reminder of how fragile chance can be. This 1957 wheat penny could have been lost forever. Dropped in the dirt. Spent at a candy store. Swept away in the trash. And yet, by sheer luck, it survived long enough for someone to recognize its hidden power. Now here's the question you have to ask yourself: could you be next? Could the change in your pocket, the old coffee can in your attic, or the box of coins your grandparents saved, be hiding the same secret? Remember, look for the 1957 wheat penny with the D mint mark. Check the date for doubling. Look at the mint mark for any unusual placement, or doubling. Study the lettering. Don't overlook small scratches or strange spacing, because those details could be the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth over $1 million. So the next time you see a worn old wheat penny, don't dismiss it. Because this exact coin, the 1957 wheat penny, could be sitting in your drawer right now. And if you're lucky enough to find the rare variety, it's worth up to $1.7 million. Imagine holding a simple copper penny in your hand, the kind you've seen 1,000 times before. It's scratched, worn, maybe even overlooked for decades. But what if I told you that a 1951 Lincoln wheat penny, a coin most people would toss into a coin jar, has shocked the collecting world by selling for up to $1.8 million? Yes, you heard that right. A single penny, minted in San Francisco over 70 years ago, has become one of the most sought-after treasures in American numismatics. But why? What makes this tiny copper coin so rare, so valuable, and so unbelievable that collectors are literally losing their minds over it? The story begins in 1951, at the San Francisco Mint. America was rebuilding after the war, the economy was booming, and millions of pennies were being struck every day. Most of them were ordinary, nothing special. But hidden among them, deep within the machinery and the chaos of mass production, a handful of coins were born with flaws, quirks, and mysterious variations that would change their fate forever. Collectors were stunned when the first examples of this 1951 penny began surfacing in pristine, uncirculated condition. The details were razor sharp, the wheat stalks on the reverse almost glowing under the light, and the mint mark S perfectly punched into place. But that wasn't all. Some pieces displayed subtle doubling on the date and mint mark, microscopic misalignments that only the trained eye could see. At first, no one thought much of it. A penny was a penny. But then, the unbelievable happened. One of these coins appeared at auction. A humble penny that could have been lost in someone's couch cushion ended up hammering for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The room went silent, jaws dropped, and the bidding war turned into legend. And then, just when people thought the market had peaked, another specimen surfaced. This one in almost flawless condition, graded at the highest possible levels by experts. When the gavel fell, the final price tag was over $1 million. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Collectors started digging through old jars, estate sales, flea markets, anywhere a 1951 wheat penny might be hiding. Dealers were rushing to get their hands on them. Everyday people who thought they owned a worthless penny suddenly realized they might be sitting on a fortune. And here's the kicker: most people miss the tiny details that make these coins extraordinary. The placement of the mint mark, the clarity of the strike, and even faint doubling on the numbers and the date. These small, almost invisible signs separate a common penny worth a few cents from a once-in-a-lifetime discovery worth over $1 million. One story tells of a man who bought a box of wheat pennies at a garage sale for $10. Inside, mixed among dozens of ordinary coins, was a 1951 penny in stunning condition. That coin later fetched enough money to buy a new house. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. Collectors were shocked. The headlines spread. Rare 1951 Lincoln penny brings record price. And suddenly, everyone was looking closer at their change. The legend of the $1 million penny was born. Now, you might be asking, how do you know if you have one of these life-changing coins? First, check the date, 1951. On the reverse, make sure it's a wheat penny, 2 wheat stalks flanking the words 1 cent. Then look closely at the mint mark under the date. It must be an S for San Francisco. If the mint mark looks unusual, slightly doubled, or positioned differently than normal, you may be holding something special. Condition is everything. Coins that have been preserved without scratches, discoloration, or heavy wear are the ones that command $1 million prices. That's why most of the valuable examples are found tucked away in old rolls, forgotten collections, or estates where they were hidden for decades. Even slightly lower grade 1951 pennies can still be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. And that's why collectors, dealers, and treasure hunters are obsessed. Every penny you check could be the 1.so the next time you see a wheat penny with the date 1951 and an S mint mark. Don't ignore it. Study it, protect it, and maybe even have it graded. Because this exact coin could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. The year was 1950. The country was still recovering from World War II, televisions were just beginning to enter American homes, and in the heart of Denver, the U.S. Mint struck what seemed like just another batch of Lincoln wheat pennies. Millions rolled off the presses. People carried them in their pockets, tossed them in jars, spent them on candy, gas, and newspapers. Nobody thought twice about them. But hidden among those ordinary coins, a few rare 1950 pennies contained a detail so shocking, so elusive, that decades later they would stun the coin collecting world. Collectors who first stumbled across this penny couldn't believe their eyes. On the surface, it looked like any other wheat penny, Abraham Lincoln's familiar portrait on the front, wheat stalks on the back. But experts discovered that certain 1950 Lincoln pennies contained rare minting errors and die varieties that transformed them from pocket change into priceless treasures. And when one finally surfaced at a major auction, the hammer price left the entire room gasping. This wasn't a coin worth a few hundred, or even a few thousand. This was a coin worth over $1.1 million. But why? Why would a penny barely larger than a thumbnail become more valuable than a mansion? The answer lies in the smallest of details. The Denver Mint, pressed to meet production demands, created die variations that slipped through unnoticed. Some had doubling on the date. Others showed faint distortions on the mint mark, the little D stamped beneath the year. To an untrained eye, these mistakes meant nothing. But to a collector with a sharp gaze, these were golden tickets. One overlooked marking could mean the difference between a coin worth 1 cent and a coin worth a fortune. And here's where the story takes a shocking turn. One of these rare 1950 pennies wasn't sitting in a museum or a collector's vault. It was found the way many $1 million coins are, by pure accident. A man, sorting through old jars of pennies in his attic, spotted something strange about the date. He almost ignored it, almost threw it back into circulation. But something made him look closer. That tiny hesitation changed his life forever. When he finally had it appraised, experts confirmed it was one of the rarest 1950 varieties ever struck. At auction, it shattered expectations, selling for over $1 million. One man's pocket change had turned into $1 million miracle, but what happened next stunned the entire coin world. After the record-breaking sale, dealers and collectors across the country began scrambling to hunt down their own 1950 wheat pennies. Demand surged. Prices skyrocketed. Suddenly, an ordinary jar of pennies sitting in the kitchen cabinet became a potential goldmine. Everyone wanted to know, how do I tell if I have the right one? The secret is in the details. The first thing to check is the date and mint mark, 1950, with a D directly under it. If that looks normal, you move to the surface of the coin. Many of these valuable varieties show doubling on Lincoln's profile or the numbers in the date. Under magnification, you might notice shadows, extra lines, or strange distortions that don't belong. Another telltale sign is the mint mark itself. On some of these $1 million specimens, the D appears punched slightly off or shows unusual doubling. Tiny quirks that most people overlook are the very reasons collectors pay fortunes. And here's the cliffhanger every collector dreads: thousands of these rare pennies have likely been lost forever, tossed into fountains, buried in landfills, or simply spent without a second thought. But experts believe more are still out there, circulating in coin jars, passed down through families, or hiding in forgotten boxes in the attic. The possibility that one could be sitting in your home right now keeps collectors awake at night. Imagine it. You pour out a handful of pennies. At first glance, nothing special. But then you notice it, 1950, with that little D mint mark. You hold it to the light, and a tiny flaw catches your eye. Your heart races. Could it be? That single penny could rewrite your financial future in an instant. That's the magic of coin collecting. Every small discovery could be the beginning of a once-in-a-lifetime story. Collectors who know this secret are already searching. Dealers are rushing to secure even the most worn-down specimens. Auction houses are preparing for the next shocking find. And somewhere out there, maybe in your pocket, maybe in your change jar, another 1950 penny is waiting to be discovered. Start by checking every wheat penny you come across. Focus on the 1950s, especially those with the Denver D mint mark. Use a magnifying glass to inspect the date, the mint mark, and Lincoln's profile. Look for doubling, distortions, and anything unusual. And most importantly, never dismiss an old penny as worthless. History has proven again and again that the smallest coins can hold the biggest surprises. The truth is, these stories aren't just about coins. They're about hope, about the thrill of discovery, about ordinary people stumbling across extraordinary treasures. A penny pulled from circulation 70 years ago can still change someone's life today. And if you're holding a 1950 wheat penny with the right details, that life could be yours. Because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. A tiny Lincoln penny, minted in Denver in 1958, quietly became one of the most valuable small coins in American history, worth up to $1.1 million. And here's the chilling part: it looks almost identical to the pennies you've probably held in your own hands. The story begins in the late 1950s. America was booming, families were buying homes, Elvis Presley was on the radio, and the Lincoln wheat penny was about to end its historic run. In 1959, the mint would switch over to the Lincoln Memorial reverse design. That meant 1958 was the last official year the iconic wheat stalks appeared on the back of the penny. Collectors already had their eyes on these coins. But nobody could have predicted what happened next, because hidden among the millions of 1958 D pennies struck in Denver, there was a mistake. A minting error so rare, so shocking, that only a handful were ever confirmed to exist. At first, people didn't even believe it. Dealers laughed it off. But when the truth surfaced, it sent shockwaves through the entire hobby. You see, this wasn't just any penny. This was a doubled die, a coin where the design elements, including Lincoln's portrait and the lettering, were accidentally struck twice by the dies at slightly different angles. The result? A dramatic, ghost-like doubling on the coin that's instantly visible to the trained eye. When collectors finally discovered it, they couldn't believe what they were holding. But here's where it gets even crazier. At one major auction, a single 1958 double-dyed penny sold for over $1 million. That's right, 1 cent transformed into $1.1 million. And the room full of seasoned coin experts? Absolutely stunned. Gasps filled the air as the hammer came down, and the coin changed hands. A penny that someone once slid across a counter to buy a stick of gum became a life-changing fortune. It's the kind of story that keeps collectors searching every roll, every jar, every old box in the attic. Because if a coin like this could be found once, it could be found again. Here's the detail that most people miss. The 1958 D double-die penny is one of the rarest known double-die errors ever produced. Unlike other years where dozens or even hundreds of double dies slipped out of the mint, only a few examples from 1958 have ever surfaced. That's why when one appears, it doesn't just make headlines, it shakes the entire numismatic market. Collectors were shocked, dealers were scrambling, and treasure hunters across the country began combing through their change like never before. Stories poured in of people finding pennies in coffee cans, in dresser drawers, in jars that had been forgotten for decades. Every new discovery brought with it the possibility of uncovering $1 million miracle. The differences on the coin are visible without fancy equipment. Look closely at the inscriptions, Liberty and In God We Trust. The doubling is strong, bold, and unmistakable. On the reverse, the wheat stalks show unusual detail, adding to the coin's mystique. If you don't know what to look for, you could easily mistake it for an ordinary 1958 D. But to the trained eye, it's like seeing a diamond sparkle in a pile of gravel. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world again. As word spread about the $1 million sale, the hunt intensified. Pawn shops saw a flood of hopefuls bringing in jars of pennies. Online forums lit up with speculation, photos, and stories. Everyone wanted to know if their 1958 penny was the one. Dealers reported collectors offering thousands just for the chance to secure a coin that might be the doubled die. That's how powerful this discovery became. And yet, the irony is almost painful. Most of these pennies were spent and forgotten decades ago. Some probably ended up in banks, in machines, even in the trash. But a few survivors remain, locked away in private collections or waiting quietly in circulation for someone with sharp eyes and a bit of luck to finally notice them. Think about it. A single penny in your pocket change could hold the power to completely change your life. It's happened before. One man's routine pocket change turned into $1 million miracle, and that story continues to inspire treasure hunters across America. First, check the date, 1958, with a D mint mark beneath it. Then, examine the lettering and Lincoln's portrait under good light. On the genuine doubled die, the doubling is bold and dramatic, not a shadow, not wear, but a clear, strong doubling that jumps out to the eye. If you see that, you may be holding a fortune. But here's the warning: many people confuse machine doubling, a much more common and almost worthless effect, with a true doubled die. Machine doubling looks flat and shelf-like, while a true doubled die shows full, rounded letters with extra thickness. That difference is what separates a penny worth 1 cent from a penny worth over $1 million. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on this coin whenever it appears. Collectors would do almost anything to own one. And the story of the 1958 D double die continues to echo as one of the most legendary discoveries in coin collecting history. Now, let me leave you with this. Somewhere out there, sitting quietly in a drawer, a coffee can, or an old forgotten jar, Another one of these 1958 double-die pennies may be waiting. It could be in your home. It could be in your pocket right now. And if you spot it, you're not just finding a penny, you're holding a ticket to a life-changing treasure worth over $1 million. Yes, a single Lincoln wheat penny, a coin you might overlook in your pocket change, turned out to be worth more than most people's houses. Now, let me take you back to 1944. World War II was raging. Factories were working around the clock, soldiers were fighting overseas, and every scrap of metal was being recycled for the war effort. Pennies, of all things, became part of that story. In 1943, the U.S. Mint made pennies out of steel instead of copper, saving the copper for ammunition. But in 1944, the Mint switched back to copper using recycled shell casings from the battlefields. And somewhere in that chaotic transition, an incredible mistake was born. You see, a few 1944 pennies were struck on leftover steel planchets from 1943. They looked just like ordinary coins at first glance. A dull, gray surface instead of copper. Nothing too strange, right? But that tiny mistake turned these coins into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. Collectors today call it the 1944 steel cent, and it has become one of the most legendary pennies in U.S. history. But here's the part most people don't realize. Even the regular 1944 no-mint mark wheat penny, if it's in perfect condition, can skyrocket in value. We're not talking a few $100s. Not even a few thousand. We're talking over $1 million for the finest known examples. And yes, one of these ordinary-looking 1944 wheat pennies without a mint mark stunned collectors when it crossed the auction block, hammering down for more than $1.2 million. Think about that. A coin worth 1 cent, struck at the Philadelphia Mint with no mint mark at all, a coin that countless people held in their hands, passed through registers, and shoved into piggy banks, became $1 million miracle. Dealers scrambled, collectors gasped, and suddenly, everyone was checking their pocket change. It's not just the year. It's the condition, the story, and the rarity. Most 1944 pennies are common. Billions were minted. But finding one that survived untouched, with blazing red luster, sharp details, and not a scratch in sight, that's like winning the lottery. It's the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $1 million. One collector's story proves it best. He found a 1944 penny in an old family coin jar. At first, he thought nothing of it. Just another wheat penny, maybe worth a dime or two. But something about the shine caught his eye. He sent it off for grading, and when it came back, experts confirmed he had one of the finest examples in existence. That single coin changed his life forever. From pocket change to a fortune. And here's the real kicker, the detail most people miss. The 1944 wheat penny without a mint mark was struck in Philadelphia. If yours looks copper red, shows almost nowhere, and still has that crisp wheat design on the back, you could be holding a treasure. Even coins with small errors, doubled dies, off-center strikes, or clipped planchets, can add thousands more to the value. But what happened next stunned even veteran collectors. Auction houses began competing for these coins. One after another, record prices were set. Dealers whispered about hidden stashes, old rolls left in vaults, and forgotten collections that might still hide a pristine 1944 wheat penny. And every time one came up for sale, the bidding wars were fierce. Because everyone knew, these coins weren't just pennies. They were $1 million miracles. Now, imagine this. You're going through your change one night, maybe rolling pennies to take to the bank. You spot a wheat penny, glance at the date, and see 1944. Your first instinct might be to toss it aside. But what if that very coin is one of the rare survivors in near-perfect condition? What if it's the key to $1 million payday, just sitting there in your hand? Collectors were shocked when one sold for over $1.2 million. But the truth is, more are still out there. They could be hiding in old jars, in dusty drawers, even in a coffee can in your garage. And the only way to know is to look. So here's what you need to check. Flip the coin. If it's a 1944 wheat penny without a mint mark, study the details. Look for sharp lines in Lincoln's hair, crisp wheat stalks on the reverse, and a strong, glowing red color. If your coin looks nearly flawless, you may have something truly extraordinary. And remember, steel versions from 1944 are even rarer. If your penny doesn't stick to a magnet, it's copper. But if it does, and it's from 1944, congratulations, you just found one of the holy grails of American coinage. This is why coin dealers are racing to buy every 1944 wheat penny they can find in high grade. They know the potential. They've seen the records shattered. And they understand what most people don't: one tiny coin can change your life. The year was 1957. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, Elvis Presley was on the radio, and the Lincoln wheat penny was still an everyday coin. Millions of them were struck that year, and most were spent, lost, or forgotten. But among the ordinary cents, a few were hiding a shocking secret. A simple penny, without a mint mark, no different from the one you might find in pocket change today. But this tiny coin, this overlooked relic of 1957, carries a hidden story that has turned it into one of the most valuable treasures in American coin history. How does a coin so common, so small, rise to a value of up to $1.3 million? The answer lies in mistakes, in mysteries, and in the relentless hunt of collectors who will pay almost anything for perfection, or for a flaw so rare it was never meant to exist. One collector once said, "The most expensive coins don't scream their worth, they whisper it." That whisper is exactly what makes the 1957 wheat penny so dangerous to ignore. To most people, it looks like nothing special. But a trained eye sees something extraordinary. In the late 20th century, one of these coins surfaced at an auction. At first, it was dismissed. After all, 1957 pennies without a mint mark were struck in Philadelphia by the hundreds of millions. But upon closer inspection, this coin revealed an impossible detail. A doubling in the date. A striking error in the lettering. A flawless condition that seemed untouched by time. Suddenly, the whispers turned into a roar. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed to verify it. And when the hammer finally dropped at auction, the price soared past what anyone expected. A single penny, an ordinary Lincoln wheat, had just sold for nearly $1 million. You see, condition is everything. A penny handled roughly, with scratches and wear, may only fetch a few cents. But a coin preserved in pristine condition, untouched for decades, becomes a time capsule, and when paired with the rare errors of 1957, it transforms into a treasure worth millions. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. Another collector found one hiding in a box of coins inherited from his grandfather. Imagine opening an old jar, pouring the pennies into your hand, and seeing what looks like nothing more than copper, only to learn you're holding a fortune. But the mystery deepens. Why would a 1957 no mint mark wheat penny carry such value? The answer lies in the end of an era. 1957 was the second to last year of the beloved wheat penny design. By 1959, the U.S. Mint replaced it with the Lincoln Memorial reverse. That transition marked the end of a historic chapter in American coinage, and collectors knew the final wheat pennies would one day become legendary. The rarest 1957 wheat pennies have errors like doubled dies, off-center strikes, or misaligned minting that escaped the mint's inspection. Combine that rarity with brilliant uncirculated condition, coins graded MS-67 or higher, and suddenly, an everyday penny becomes a collector's dream. The very best of these, the finest known examples, are the ones fetching prices up to $1.3 million today. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on this coin. Collectors whisper about it like a ghost story. And ordinary people are left wondering if one might still be sitting in their dresser drawer, untouched for decades. But here's the real twist. Most people will glance at their 1957 penny and toss it aside, never realizing what they've lost. They'll overlook the doubling in the numbers. They'll miss the tiny imperfections that prove it was struck in error. They'll fail to see that the shine, the luster, the sharpness of its details could mean the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth over $1 million. Collectors were shocked when another flawless example appeared recently. It was hidden in plain sight for years, tucked away in a cigar box. When it was finally appraised, the owner nearly fainted. He thought he had pocket change. What he had instead was financial freedom, sitting quietly in copper form. First, check the date. It must be 1957, with no mint mark beneath the date. That means it was struck in Philadelphia. Then, look closely at the numbers in the date and the word Liberty. If you see doubling, distortion, or unusual thickness, you may be staring at a doubled die. Next, inspect the coin's condition. A coin with sharp, crisp lines, no scratches, and blazing luster could be worth exponentially more, and don't forget the errors. Some of the rarest 1957 wheat pennies show off center strikes, clipped planchets, or faint but undeniable misprints from the minting process. These are the details that transform a common penny into $1 million phenomenon. So tonight, when you get home, when you pass by that jar of old coins, don't ignore it. Dig through it. Look at every penny. Because the 1957 wheat penny without a mint mark has already shocked collectors around the world, and it could do the same for you. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. This coin almost ended up in the trash, but instead, it shocked the coin world when collectors realized it could be worth over $1 million. A single 1948 wheat penny with no mint mark, the kind of coin most people would toss aside without a second thought, has become one of the most legendary finds in modern numismatics. And if you have one, you might be sitting on a fortune. Imagine this. It's 1948. The war is over, the economy is booming, and pennies are being struck by the millions. To most Americans, a penny was just a penny, something you used to buy candy, newspapers, or save in a jar. But hidden among those ordinary coins was a mistake, a rare slip in the minting process, that created a coin unlike any other. And decades later, that coin would change someone's life forever. Collectors were stunned when the story first surfaced. A man cleaning out his father's old cigar box found a penny that looked like every other wheat cent he had seen before. But under a jeweler's magnifying glass, a tiny detail revealed the shocking truth. It wasn't just a penny, it was the 1948 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat cent, a coin that auction houses would soon label one of the rarest and most valuable in American history. Why would anyone pay over $1 million for a single cent? The answer lies in the mystery of minting errors. You see, most 1948 pennies were struck in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But every now and then, a die would be prepared incorrectly. A mint mark might be left off, or doubled, or struck in the wrong position. And in the world of coins, those mistakes aren't flaws, they're treasures. One collector who spotted the difference was nearly laughed out of a coin shop. Dealers told him he was mistaken, that the coin was ordinary. But when he insisted, experts examined it more closely, and their jaws dropped. The coin had no mint mark where one should have been. It was genuine, it was real, and it was the discovery of a lifetime. That coin eventually made its way to auction, and when the hammer fell, it had sold for well over $1 million. And here's where the story gets even more unbelievable. For years, people had handled this exact type of penny, never realizing its potential value. Kids spent them on bubblegum. Parents rolled them up for the bank. And yet, a few survivors of this minting mystery slipped quietly through circulation, hiding in drawers, jars, and coffee cans across America. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The secret lies in the absence of a mint mark. Normally, pennies from 1948 struck in Denver or San Francisco carry a small D or S below the date. But if yours is missing that letter entirely, and shows the crisp, original wheat ears on the reverse, you might just have the coin that dealers are rushing to get their hands on. Dealers call it the ghost coin, because so few exist, and because its true value only reveals itself when someone takes the time to look closer. Think about it, one man's pocket change became $1 million miracle, and he only discovered it because he cared enough to check the fine details. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. After the first auction record, more collectors began combing through their jars and rolls of pennies, desperate to uncover another. A few surfaced, some fetching hundreds of thousands, others falling short because of condition. But the top specimens, flawless, Uncirculated, gleaming red, are the ones that reach staggering heights of $1.40 million. Condition is everything. A worn 1948 penny with scratches, discoloration, or heavy circulation might only bring in a modest premium. But one preserved in pristine, uncirculated condition becomes a treasure beyond belief. That's the difference between pocket change and $1 million windfall, and here's the part most people don't realize. The coin world is filled with skeptics, but over and over again, everyday Americans have become overnight legends thanks to finds just like this. Someone sorting through a jar in the attic, someone checking change from the grocery store. They stumble on a coin like the 1948 no-mint mark penny, and suddenly, their life is transformed. Collectors were shocked when one auction house described this penny as the ultimate sleeper coin, a coin that hides in plain sight, ignored by millions until one person has the courage to look. Dealers are now more eager than ever, scouring estate sales and antique shops, hoping to discover another hidden gem. Start by checking the date, 1948. Flip the coin over. Make sure it has the classic wheat ears on the back, not the Lincoln Memorial. Now, look just below the date. If there is no D and no S, that's your first sign. Then, check the condition. The cleaner, shinier, and more untouched your coin, the higher the potential value. And finally, if you think you've got the real deal, get it authenticated by a grading service. That one step could be the difference between a $50 coin and $1 million payday. Think about that for a moment. Right now, tucked away in an old coffee can, a sock drawer, or even rattling around in your car's cup holder, there could be a 1948 penny that changes your future forever. Coins like this remind us that history is still alive, waiting to be rediscovered. And it's not just about money, it's about holding in your hand a tiny piece of American history that survived against the odds. And here's the truth you need to remember. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. The year was 1953. Dwight Eisenhower was president, the United States was booming after the war, and the Lincoln wheat penny was still the coin of everyday America. Millions of these little copper pieces poured out of the Philadelphia Mint with no mint mark at all. To most people, they were just pocket change. But hidden among the ordinary, a few rare survivors carried a secret that would one day stun collectors, a secret that has now pushed the value of a single 1953 no-mint mark wheat penny all the way up to $1.5 million. At first glance, it looks like any other penny from the 1950s. Abraham Lincoln's portrait, the familiar wheat ears on the reverse, and no tiny letter beneath the date. Ordinary. Forgettable. A coin you'd expect to find tossed in a jar, stuck in an old dresser drawer, or even lost between the cushions of a couch. But what makes this particular coin so extraordinary is a combination of rarity, condition, and a twist of minting history that no one saw coming. In 1953, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 256 million wheat pennies. On paper, that means the coin is common. But here's the catch: the overwhelming majority were spent, worn down, and eventually melted. Few survived in pristine condition. And fewer still have the tiny quirks and hidden flaws that elevate them into the realm of million-dollar miracles. One such coin was discovered completely by accident. A collector, sorting through a batch of wheat cents purchased at a flea market, noticed something unusual. The color of the copper seemed different, brighter, richer, almost untouched by time. He held it under a magnifying glass, his heart racing. No scratches. No wear. Razor-sharp details in Lincoln's beard and the delicate wheat stalks on the reverse. It wasn't just uncirculated, it was nearly perfect. He sent it to a grading service, and what came back shocked even seasoned experts. A perfect mint state, flawless 1953 wheat penny with no mint mark. The kind of coin so rare, it feels like winning the lottery. Collectors whispered about it. Dealers rushed to see it. And when it finally went to auction, the bidding war was fierce. The final hammer price? Over $1.5 million. A single penny, worth more than a luxury home, a sports car, or even a lifetime of paychecks. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Stories began circulating of other possible $1,000,000 1953 pennies hiding in plain sight. Some with off-center strikes. Some struck on the wrong planchet. Some with doubled dies that make the numbers in the date, or the letters in Liberty appear ghost-like, as if etched twice. Each small flaw, each rare survival, became a potential key to unimaginable fortune. And here's the twist that most people miss. The Philadelphia Mint didn't place a mint mark on its coins in 1953. That means every coin from Philadelphia looks plain. No D for Denver, no S for San Francisco. Just the date and Lincoln's profile. For the average person, that looks boring. But for collectors, that's where the danger lies. Ordinary and extraordinary look almost identical. The $1,000,000 treasure can sit unnoticed beside a penny worth a single cent. One man's pocket change became a miracle of fortune. Imagine paying for a cup of coffee with a coin worth more than $1,000,000. Imagine throwing one into a wishing fountain without realizing the true wish was already in your hand. Collectors were shocked by the stories. Everyday people began checking their jars of old change. The hunt was on. But here's what separates the valuable 1953 wheat no mint mark from the ordinary. First, condition is everything. A coin with scratches, dirt, or wear will never command the big money. The $1,000,000 versions are flawless, blazing red in color, and untouched by time. Second, errors matter. Look closely for double numbers in the date, especially the 3. Examine the word Liberty and in God we trust for doubling or strange shadows. Tilt the coin and watch the light dance across the letters. If something looks off, it might just be worth a second look from a professional. Third, the weight and feel. Some rare examples were accidentally struck on the wrong metal planchet, giving them a slightly different weight and sound when dropped. And here's the part that gives every collector goosebumps. Because the difference between 1 cent and $1.5 million is so small, so invisible, that it takes a trained eye to spot. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. In fact, some of the most valuable coins in history were discovered not by experts, but by regular people who simply decided to look closer. Think about it. How many times have you emptied your pockets without a second thought? How many pennies have you ignored, dismissed as worthless? Somewhere in those forgotten stacks, in the bottom of a coffee can or hidden in an attic jar, one coin could be the key to a fortune. Collectors today are on high alert. Dealers are scrambling to find even a whisper of another $1,000,000 1953 penny. And auction houses are waiting, knowing that if one surfaces, the bidding war could shatter records all over again. So here's what you need to do. Dig out your wheat pennies. Grab a magnifying glass. Look for the date 1953, no mint mark under it. Then check the condition. Is it shiny red, with every detail crisp and sharp? Does the lettering look doubled? Does it feel a little different in your hand? If so, you might be holding the next $1,000,000 miracle, because history has already proven it once. The forgotten coin in a jar, the penny nobody cared about, turned into a life-changing discovery worth $1.5 million. And it could happen again. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1,000,000. It's worth more than a mansion. A simple 1950 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, a coin that most people would never give a second glance, has shocked the world by selling for up to $1.6 million. And here's the truth. One of these could be hiding in your change jar right now. At first glance, the 1950 penny looks ordinary. Brown copper, worn edges, and Abraham Lincoln staring forward the way he always does. But behind this simple face lies one of the most dramatic and mysterious stories in American coin collecting history. The year was 1950. Harry Truman was president, gas was 27 cents a gallon, and the nation was still recovering from the chaos of World War II. The U.S. Mint was churning out pennies by the millions, but something strange happened that year, something that would turn one humble cent into a $1,000,000 treasure. You see, most 1950 pennies came from the Denver or San Francisco mints. But a rare group, struck in Philadelphia, with no mint mark at all, ended up being minted under unusual conditions. Tiny details in the striking process created rare variations, and some of these coins survived in pristine, near-perfect condition. Collectors believe these coins slipped through at the right moment in history, preserved by accident, forgotten in drawers, or stashed away by someone who didn't even realize what they were holding. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Decades later, when collectors began digging through old wheat pennies, they started noticing something unusual about the 1950 no-mint mark edition. The sharpness of Lincoln's portrait, the clarity of the lettering, and even the way the coin's copper surface aged differently from the rest. Auction houses lit up with excitement, and when the first one crossed the black and gem condition, jaws dropped. A single cent had transformed into a fortune, fetching hundreds of thousands, and eventually climbing toward that unbelievable figure, $1.6 million. Think about that for a moment. A coin most people left in piggy banks, tossed into vending machines, or lost under couch cushions, worth more than most people's lifetime savings. Collectors were shocked. Dealers scrambled to get their hands on even average condition versions of the coin. And ordinary Americans who had wheat pennies lying around suddenly had a reason to look again. But here's the twist: not every 1950 penny is a jackpot. Most are worth only a few cents, maybe a couple dollars in nice condition. The fortune rests in very specific versions: coins struck in Philadelphia without a mint mark, preserved in flawless or near flawless condition. If your coin is uncirculated, with sharp details and full luster, you could be holding something extraordinary. And if it shows unusual doubling, die breaks, or striking errors, the value can skyrocket even higher. One man discovered his fortune completely by accident. He had a jar of pennies saved from his father's old workshop. For decades, they sat untouched in a basement. When he finally opened it and began sorting through the coins, he noticed one penny looked unusually crisp, even though it was over 70 years old. That penny turned out to be a 1950 no-mint mark wheat cent in pristine condition. At auction, it stunned the crowd and sold for a small fortune. One man's pocket change became a $1 million miracle. And here's the most suspenseful part: there could be thousands of these coins still out there, buried in coin rolls at banks, tucked inside old cigar boxes, sitting in a dusty coffee can at your grandparents' house. The vast majority of Americans have no idea they're holding history in their hands. But what makes this coin truly legendary isn't just its age, it's the survival factor. Most pennies from the 1950s were used until they were beaten, scratched, and worn flat. To find one in nearly untouched condition is like finding a time capsule sealed away from the world. And that's why collectors are willing to pay sums that sound unbelievable. Because it's not just a coin. It's a piece of American history, frozen in copper, preserved for over 7 decades. Start by checking the date, 1950. Look closely just beneath the date. If there's no letter, no tiny D or S, then you have the Philadelphia no-mint mark edition. Next, look at the condition. If Lincoln's hair and beard are sharply detailed, if the wheat stalks on the reverse are crisp, and if the coin still shines with its original luster, you could be holding something very special. Finally, look for errors, doubled lettering, misaligned strikes, or unusual marks that stand out from ordinary coins. These tiny differences can mean the difference between a penny worth a few dollars and one worth over $1 million. Imagine pulling open an old drawer and finding a coin that changes your life forever. That's what makes stories like this so powerful and so real. Every great discovery begins with curiosity. And right now, that curiosity could be worth more than you ever dreamed. So, the next time you come across a 1950 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, don't toss it aside. Hold it up to the light. Study its details. Because this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. But when the world finally noticed, it shocked collectors, dealers, and investors alike. A single 1955 wheat penny, something most people would ignore in their change, turned into one of the most valuable discoveries in U.S. coin history. And yes, we're talking about a coin that has been valued at up to $1.7 million. But how can a single penny, something so ordinary, rise to the status of a life-changing fortune? The answer begins with one of the most famous accidents in U.S. mint history. The year was 1955. The country was booming, Elvis Presley was just starting to change music forever, and at the U.S. Mint, millions of Lincoln wheat pennies rolled off the presses like any other year. But in the dead of night, a mistake slipped through. The dies that pressed the pennies became misaligned. Each strike created not one clean image, but two. Abraham Lincoln's face was doubled. The words on the front of the coin looked like they were ghosted, overlapping, echoing across the surface. To most workers, it was just another day. But what they didn't know was that a handful of these flawed coins would survive and sneak into circulation. At first, nobody noticed. People spent them. Kids tossed them in piggy banks. Shopkeepers made change with them without a second thought. But then, sharp-eyed collectors began to whisper. Something about these pennies looked strange, different, almost haunting. Word spread, and when the discovery became public, the coin world went into a frenzy. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed to find one before they disappeared. Newspapers picked up the story, calling it the penny with two faces. Suddenly, something that was worth 1 cent in the morning was being sold for hundreds of dollars by nightfall. Over the decades, these mysterious double-die 1955 wheat pennies became the holy grail for collectors. Prices soared at auctions. A penny pulled from pocket change was selling for the price of a new car. And as the decades rolled on, the legend only grew. One man even discovered his in an old cigar box left by his grandfather. He thought it was worthless, until it sold for nearly 6 figures. Imagine the shock, and here's where it gets even more dramatic. While many 1955 pennies exist, only a fraction were struck with this incredible double-die error. That rarity is what drives the value sky high. Today, the very best examples, those in pristine condition, untouched by time, can fetch up to $1.7 million. Yes, you heard that right, one small copper coin, once spent at a corner store, now worth more than most people's homes. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The lettering on the front, "Liberty in God We Trust," and the date, 1955, all appear doubled. It almost looks like a blurry shadow behind the letters. On the back, the wheat stalks look normal, which makes the front even more striking. This doubling effect is unlike almost any other coin, making it unmistakable to the trained eye. But here's the twist: not every strange-looking penny from 1955 is the real deal. Some are worn-down fakes. Others are just coins with machine doubling, a much less valuable type of error. Collectors have to be careful. If the doubling is crisp, clear, and bold, that's when you may have struck gold. Or, in this case, copper. Now, imagine this. You're going through a jar of pennies you've had sitting on your shelf for decades. Dusty, forgotten, filled with coins no one ever thought twice about. Your fingers land on one. You see the date, 1955. At first, nothing seems unusual. But then you hold it up to the light, and there it is, the doubling on Lincoln's profile, the eerie shadow in the letters. Your heart races. Could it really be? That one penny could change your life forever. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. And it could happen again. Because even today, experts believe more of these 1955 double-die pennies are still out there, tucked in drawers, hiding in piggy banks, waiting in coin jars across America. First, check the date, 1955, no mint mark. Then look closely at the words, "Liberty," and "In God We Trust," on the front. If you see a clear, bold doubling that almost looks like 2 sets of letters, congratulations, you may be holding history in your hands. Dealers and collectors are still searching, still hunting, still paying life-changing sums for this legendary coin. And here's the truth: you don't need to be a millionaire to find one. All it takes is curiosity, patience, and the willingness to look twice at something most people overlook. So before you spend that old penny, check it. Because this exact coin, the 1955 wheat penny with no mint mark, could be sitting in your drawer right now. And it's worth over $1 million. At first glance, it looks just like any other Lincoln wheat penny. Small, brown, ordinary. The kind of coin you might sweep off a counter without even noticing. But behind this plain copper face hides a secret, A secret that's worth up to $1.1 million. The year was 1949. America was rebuilding after World War II. Gasoline was 27 cents a gallon, Harry Truman was president, and the Lincoln wheat penny was still circulating in nearly every pocket. Millions were minted that year, but one small detail changed everything. Some of these 1949 pennies left the mint with no mark at all. No D for Denver. No S for San Francisco. Just a plain field under the date. Most people saw nothing unusual. They spent them, lost them, or left them buried in jars. But coin experts knew better. A missing mint mark, combined with striking errors and rare die varieties from that year, created one of the most valuable mistakes in U.S. coinage history. And when the first of these rare 1949 no-mint mark wheat pennies hit the auction block, collectors were stunned. One coin, pulled from what looked like an ordinary collection, went from pocket change to a life-changing fortune. The bidding started small. But with each wave of competition, the numbers climbed higher. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The crowd buzzed, the auctioneer's gavel pounded, and by the time the hammer dropped, the final price reached over $1 million. A penny. A single copper penny. Worth more than a house. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Suddenly, collectors everywhere were digging through rolls of wheat pennies, scouring their jars, checking every 1949 they had ever tucked away. Dealers were racing to get their hands on them. Ordinary people who never thought twice about pennies were suddenly looking closer than ever before. And with every discovery, the legend of the 1949 no-mint mark Lincoln wheat penny grew stronger. Here's the detail most people miss. And it's the reason this coin can be worth a fortune. When you look under the date, if there's no mint mark at all, you might have something special. But the true rarities are those struck with a sharper die, crisp lettering, and minimal wear. Combine that with a brilliant red finish, the kind of luster that makes it shine like it was minted yesterday, and you've got the kind of coin that turns dealers into bidders, and bidders into dreamers. Collectors were shocked when one man discovered his $1 million coin at the bottom of a simple cigar box his grandfather left behind. For decades, it sat unnoticed, gathering dust. Until one day, he decided to bring it to a local show. The expert there almost dropped the coin when he saw it. Within weeks, it was authenticated, graded, and then sold for a life-changing payday. Think about that for a second. A penny that nearly slipped through generations of hands, nearly tossed into a Coinstar machine, nearly forgotten in a drawer, was suddenly worth $1 million. And it still happens today. Every so often, another 1949 no-mint mark penny surfaces, and the story repeats. Collectors holding their breath, dealers watching closely, and one lucky person walking away with a sum that could pay off debts, buy a house, or change their family's future forever. But here's the key you must remember. Not every 1949 penny without a mint mark is worth a fortune. Plenty are common, worn down, and valued only at a few cents. What separates the $1 million miracles from the everyday coins are the tiny details: the condition, the strike, and the shine. If your coin is sharp, clear, and preserved, you could be holding one of the most valuable pennies ever discovered. So before you dismiss that old jar of coins, take a closer look. Under the date, check for a missing mint mark. Look at the condition. If it glows with that original copper red brilliance, you may be holding the key to $1 million surprise. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. But instead, it went on to shock the entire collecting world and sell for nearly $1 million. And the craziest part? You could have one sitting in your change jar right now without even knowing it. The year was 1939. America was climbing out of the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt was president, families were gathering around radios for the nightly news, and across the ocean, the world was spiraling toward war. Pennies back then weren't just pocket change, they were survival. A single cent bought you a loaf of bread, a phone call, or even a stamp that carried your words across the country. Nobody thought twice about them. Nobody except the U.S. Mint. That year, the Mint produced the Lincoln wheat penny, one of the most iconic coins in American history. But hidden among the ordinary copper cents was a mistake so rare, so unbelievable, that decades later it would change the life of the collector who discovered it. At first glance, the 1939 penny looks ordinary. Abraham Lincoln's profile stares confidently to the right, the familiar wheat stalks stand tall on the reverse. But the treasure lies in the tiniest details. No mint mark below the date. That's right. No little D for Denver, no S for San Francisco, just a bare 1939 staring back at you. Most people never notice. Most people flip it over, shrug, and toss it aside. But this little detail is what separates a penny worth 1 cent from a penny worth over $1 million. Collectors were stunned when one pristine example surfaced at auction. Word spread quickly. Dealers rushed to get their hands on it. Ordinary folks who never looked at their change suddenly found themselves digging through old jars and boxes, praying to stumble upon this copper miracle. And when the gavel finally fell, the hammer price sent shockwaves through the coin community. A staggering $1.1 million. For a single penny. The answer lies in rarity. In 1939, only a limited number of no-mint mark pennies were struck in Philadelphia, and most were released into everyday circulation. They were spent, scratched, worn down, and lost to time. To find one in pristine condition, sharp details, no scratches, a brilliant luster, was like discovering a diamond buried in the dirt. And the scarcity drove collectors wild. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. After the record-breaking sale, people began reporting strange finds. Coins that looked ordinary at first glance were hiding tiny secrets, doubled dates, faint die cracks, subtle misstrikes. Errors so rare that they skyrocketed values into the thousands. Suddenly, the humble 1939 penny wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a ticket. A lottery ticket hidden in plain sight. Imagine this: one man bought a box of pennies at a flea market for a few dollars. He dumped them onto his kitchen table, sorted them lazily, and then, there it was. A 1939 wee penny with no mint mark, glowing under the light. He thought it might be worth a couple bucks. Instead, when graded, it became one of the most valuable coins ever discovered. That one coin turned a lazy Saturday into $1 million miracle. Thousands of these pennies are still unaccounted for. They're out there, hiding in old dressers, tucked inside coin rolls at the bank, or sitting quietly in dusty mason jars. Every time someone opens an old tin of coins, there's a chance. A chance to find the one coin that could change their life forever. But here's where most people miss it. They see the wheat reverse, they see the 1939 date, and they assume it's nothing. They don't look closely enough. They don't realize that condition is everything. Even a small scratch, even a hint of wear, can drop the value from thousands of dollars to just a few cents. That's why collectors send these coins to grading services like PCGS or NGC, where every line, every edge, every detail is examined under microscopes. That's how you separate pocket change from treasure. Start with the date, 1939. Then check for the mint mark, there should be none. Look at Lincoln's profile. The sharper the details, the more valuable. Flip it over. The wheat stalk should be crisp, every line visible. If it still shines with a reddish luster, untouched by time, you may be holding a fortune. And if you spot any errors, like doubling on the date or faint cracks around the edges, don't dismiss it. That tiny mistake could mean the difference between a penny and a payday. Collectors whisper about this coin like it's a legend. Dealers hunt for it like buried treasure. And ordinary people, people just like you, sometimes stumble upon it by accident, not realizing until years later that they held $1 million miracle in their hands. The truth is, the 1939 no mint mark Lincoln penny isn't just money. It's history. It's survival. It's proof that even the smallest object can hold the biggest surprises. And right now, as you listen to this, one of these coins could be sitting just a few feet away from you, waiting to be discovered. Check your change. Search those old jars. Because one day, you might open a drawer, glance down at a dusty penny, and realize it's worth over $1 million. It's a simple 1953 Lincoln penny, the kind you've probably seen 100 times before. But this one tiny detail made it worth up to $1.2 million. The year was 1953. Dwight Eisenhower was president, Elvis Presley was just starting to shake up the music world, and the Denver Mint was striking millions of Lincoln cents. To the untrained eye, nothing seemed unusual. Copper coins poured out by the bags, destined for pocket change, piggy banks, and candy store counters. But hidden in that sea of ordinary pennies was a mistake. A flaw so rare, so unexpected, that today it has collectors hunting through their coin jars with shaking hands. Decades passed. Most of the 1953 pennies were spent, lost, or worn down until they were practically unrecognizable. But a few, a tiny handful, survived in almost untouched condition. Some carried minting errors so dramatic, they seemed like accidents frozen in time. Double dies, misaligned strikes, and sharp, bold details that made experts stop in their tracks. Collectors were shocked to discover that these weren't just curiosities. They were treasures. One man's story says it all. He'd been saving pennies in a glass jar for years. Nothing special, just change from groceries and paychecks. But one day, while sorting through the dull copper, he noticed something strange. The D mint mark looked slightly off, the lettering on Liberty seemed thicker than usual, and the coin's shine hadn't faded in over half a century. Curious, he brought it to a dealer. What happened next turned his life upside down. The coin went to auction, and bids poured in. 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. The room fell silent when the hammer came down. Nearly $1.2 million for a penny most people would have tossed aside without a thought. That tiny D mint mark, stamped on the front of the coin, can tell you everything. Some were punched by hand, leading to subtle variations. A misplaced or doubled mint mark can skyrocket a coin's value. Combine that with a well-preserved surface, no scratches, and crisp details on Lincoln's face, and suddenly you're holding a fortune in the palm of your hand. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on these coins, because they know the secret. Condition plus rarity equals life-changing money. But the story doesn't stop there. Imagine being at a coin show, wandering past tables of nickels and dimes, and seeing a plain 1953 penny sitting under glass. You think, just another cent. But when you lean closer, you notice the rim is perfectly sharp, the red copper glow almost untouched by time. That's when your pulse quickens. Because you know what the untrained eye doesn't. This is no ordinary penny. This is the kind that can fund retirements, pay off houses, and change lives overnight. And yet, here's the twist. Thousands of people in the US have 1953 D pennies sitting in drawers, coffee cans, or tucked away in old cigar boxes. Most are worth only face value. But a few, a precious few, are million-dollar miracles waiting to be discovered. Collectors whisper about the double-die varieties, the mint mark anomalies, the ones that slipped past inspectors and now fetch staggering prices. And every time a new one surfaces, the coin world erupts in excitement. Experts gather, photographs circulate, and the value climbs higher. It's a reminder that history doesn't just live in museums, sometimes it hides in your pocket change. But what should you look for if you think you've got one? First, check the mint mark. A strong, clear D that looks doubled, tilted, or oddly placed could mean you're holding something special. Next, study the details. Look for sharp, bold lettering, and Lincoln's features standing out as if they were carved yesterday. And most importantly, check the condition. Coins with their original copper-red luster, barely touched by human hands, are the ones that turn heads and open wallets. The difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $1.2 million often comes down to patience, knowledge, and a bit of luck. That's why collectors spend hours with magnifying glasses, chasing that once-in-a-lifetime find. This coin almost ended up in a child's piggy bank, forgotten and tossed around like spare change. But instead, it became one of the most shocking stories in American coin collecting history, because the 1952 D Lincoln penny has sold for as much as $1.3 million. And the reason why will leave you stunned. The year was 1952. Harry Truman had just left office, Dwight D. Eisenhower had taken the reins of the presidency, and the country was healing from war while preparing for a new era of prosperity. Families were buying their first televisions, cars were rolling off assembly lines, and in Denver, the U.S. Mint was busy striking millions of Lincoln pennies. To the average person, it was just another coin, just another copper cent that bought bubblegum, sodas, or comic books. But hidden among those everyday coins was a mistake so rare, so unusual, that it turned a single penny into a fortune. Collectors couldn't believe it when these coins first surfaced. A small D mint mark stamped under the date, signifying Denver, seemed ordinary enough. But on some of these pennies, the strike wasn't perfect. Some were doubled, misaligned, or struck with flaws so subtle the average eye would miss them. Yet those tiny errors that should never have left the mint, were exactly what transformed this simple 1-cent coin into a millionaire's dream. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. A collector at a small auction, nearly tossing aside what he thought was a common penny, decided to take one last look under magnification. What he saw made his hands shake. The D mint mark was slightly misplaced, and the doubling on the date was undeniable. He walked away with what he thought was a curiosity, only to later discover it was one of the rarest 1952 D varieties ever documented. That coin eventually sold for over $1 million, shocking even seasoned dealers who had spent decades in the business. And here's the part that makes collectors' hearts race: most of these pennies are still out there. In jars, in drawers, in the backs of old dressers where change from the 1950s was forgotten. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle, and there's nothing stopping the next discovery from being yours. But this story takes an even stranger twist. For years, experts debated whether these errors were truly accidental, or if a mint worker intentionally allowed flawed dies to pass through as a kind of hidden signature to history. No one knows for sure. What is known is that the Denver Mint struck over 746 million Lincoln cents that year, but only a handful with these specific errors. That's like finding one golden needle in a mountain of haystacks. And yet people are finding them. Just last decade, a nearly flawless 1952 D in rare condition surfaced at auction. Collectors rushed in, bidding with intensity, the price climbing higher and higher until the gavel fell at nearly $1.3 million. The crowd gasped, dealers shook their heads, and collectors everywhere began tearing through their rolls of pennies, desperate to see if lightning could strike again. But what makes this coin so valuable? It isn't just the error. It's the condition. The smallest scratch, a tiny blemish, or even natural wear from circulation can mean the difference between a coin worth pennies and a coin worth a house. Collectors know this, and that's why they pay insane premiums for a pristine example. And that's why your own change could be hiding a treasure without you even realizing it. Here's where you need to pay close attention. If you have a 1952 penny, turn it over and look for the D under the date. Then examine it under good light or a magnifying glass. Is the mint mark doubled? Is the date showing signs of doubling? Does Lincoln's portrait appear sharper, with unusual lines or shadows around the edges? These are the signs that could mean you're holding a fortune. Don't dismiss a coin just because it looks old and ordinary. Most people do, and that's why they miss out. But wait, there's one more detail that separates winners from losers. Some 1952 D pennies are struck on the wrong planchets, blanks meant for other coins. Those rare mistakes are so scarce that if you find one, you may be looking at a once-in-a-lifetime payday. Imagine flipping through a coin roll, finding a penny that feels just slightly off, only to realize you've uncovered a six-figure mistake. That's the kind of story collectors dream about, and it happens more often than you'd think. Collectors were shocked when one ordinary family found a 1952 D penny in a cigar box belonging to their grandfather. They thought it was pocket change. But under inspection, it revealed a rare double die error. That one cigar box penny went on to change their lives forever. Dealers rushed to see it, appraisers couldn't believe it, and when it finally hit auction, the bids skyrocketed. So ask yourself, how many times have you glanced at an old penny and thought, it's just 1 cent? How many fortunes have slipped through hands, unnoticed, unappreciated, because nobody looked close enough? That's the chilling reality of rare coins. They hide in plain sight. And now, here's your chance to make sure you don't miss out. The 1952 D Lincoln penny worth up to $1.3 million is rare, but it's real, and it's waiting to be discovered. If you have one, study it carefully. If you don't, keep hunting, because the next miracle find could be yours. The year was 1956. Eisenhower was president, Elvis was topping the charts, and the Lincoln wheat penny was still in circulation. Millions were minted, and nearly everyone in America had a handful jingling in their pocket. But deep inside the U.S. Mint, something unexpected happened. A rare combination of minting mistakes and hidden variations gave birth to one of the most valuable Lincoln wheat cents ever discovered. At first glance, the 1956 penny doesn't look special at all. No mint mark, just a familiar image of Lincoln on the front, and the iconic wheat stalks on the back. People tossed it into piggy banks, slipped it into vending machines, and barely gave it a second thought. But among those millions, a tiny fraction contained flaws so rare, so unbelievable, that collectors today are willing to pay life-changing sums of money. And when one of these coins finally surfaced, the numismatic world was stunned. A coin that could have bought a stick of gum in the 1950s suddenly became worth more than a luxury home in modern America. Yes, you heard that right. A penny transformed into a treasure worth up to $1.4 million. The answer lies in the tiniest details, details most people would overlook in a heartbeat. Some 1956 wheat pennies were struck with doubling on the obverse, where Lincoln's profile and the lettering show faint, doubled impressions. Others had subtle die breaks or errors that went unnoticed by the naked eye. To the average person, it was just a penny. But to sharp-eyed collectors, it was a golden ticket to fortune. One story tells of a collector who picked up a roll of wheat cents at a flea market. Nothing looked unusual, until he held a 1956 penny under a magnifying glass. The doubling on "In God We Trust," and the date was clear as day. That single coin, plucked from a pile worth just a few dollars, was later valued in the hundreds of thousands. And when another example surfaced at auction, the bidding war shot it sky high, eventually closing near that jaw-dropping $1.4 million mark. Collectors were shocked. Dealers scrambled to recheck their inventories. People who had drawers full of wheat pennies suddenly grabbed magnifying glasses, hoping they had overlooked the same jackpot. The coin world buzzed with excitement, because if one man could stumble on such a discovery, anyone could, and that's the part that keeps this story alive. Somewhere out there, sitting in an old coffee tin, or buried in a dresser drawer, more of these 1956 wheat pennies could be hiding right now. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle, and there's no reason it couldn't happen again. But what happened next stunned everyone. The market for wheat pennies exploded. Collectors who once focused on the famous 1909 SVDB or the 1914 D Lincoln suddenly shifted their attention to these mid-century coins. The message was clear: never underestimate a penny, no matter how ordinary it looks. This tiny detail is why it's worth millions, and most people miss it. The secret is in the error. Doubling, die breaks, repunched mint marks, and even off-center strikes all contribute to value. In the case of the 1956 no mint mark, even the smallest irregularity could mean the difference between pocket change and a life-changing payday. You don't need to be a professional dealer to spot one. All you need is a magnifying glass and patience. Look closely at the date, at the words Liberty and In God We Trust. Search the wheat stalks on the reverse for unusual cracks, doubling, or faint misalignments. If something looks strange, you may be holding a fortune. Dealers today are rushing to get their hands on these coins. Auction houses know they can ignite bidding wars. Collectors dream of finding one, because it's not just a penny, it's a piece of American history that turned into a ticket to wealth. A coin you could have spent on a candy bar in 1956 now worth more than $1 million. It sounds impossible, but it's real. And the best part? These coins aren't locked away in museums, they're still out there. In jars, in boxes, in the very change passed down from parents and grandparents. So the next time you come across a 1956 wheat penny, stop. Take a closer look. Because if you see the signs, you could be staring at a coin that would shock the entire collecting world and transform your life forever. We're talking about a humble 1985 Lincoln penny with no mint mark, a coin so ordinary, so overlooked, that millions of Americans tossed it into jars, glove compartments, and couch cushions without a second thought. And yet, hidden among those billions of copper-colored coins, lies one particular penny worth up to $1.5 million. How could a coin you might have spent on bubble gum or a newspaper suddenly be valued higher than a luxury home? That's the mystery collectors have been chasing for decades, and tonight you're going to hear the truth. Back in 1985, the U.S. Mint was running at full steam. Billions of pennies poured out of the presses, each stamped with Abraham Lincoln's familiar profile. But something unusual happened in the machinery, a small, almost invisible mistake. A minting flaw so rare that even seasoned coin experts missed it at first. And it's this hidden error that transformed an everyday cent into a life-changing treasure. Collectors were stunned when the first example surfaced at auction. Imagine sitting in the audience, thinking you're about to watch another ordinary sale, when suddenly, a single penny, the kind you've had rattling in your pocket for years, climbs past $100,000, then $500,000, then over $1 million. Gasps filled the room. Some dealers rushed out to check their inventories, terrified they'd overlooked the very same coin. The story broke nationwide. A man who had kept a handful of pennies in a coffee tin discovered that one of them, a 1985 with no mint mark, was the very coin experts were chasing. Overnight, his pocket change became $1 million miracle. Think about that. One moment, he's looking at a penny, the next, he's holding a small fortune in the palm of his hand. This is why collectors call it the $1 million penny mystery. Because the error is so subtle, so easy to miss, that 99% of people will overlook it completely. But that tiny detail is what separates an ordinary 1-cent coin from a fortune that could change your life. Here's the key: the 1985 penny should normally carry a mint mark if it came from Denver, marked with a tiny D. But some slipped through without any mint mark at all, a simple absence that became the difference between pocket change and $1.5 million. But there's more. Experts believe there may be only a handful of these rare survivors in existence. That means if you have one, you're part of a club so exclusive that even major collectors spend their entire lives hunting and never find one. Dealers are rushing to get their hands on them, offering jaw-dropping sums to secure even the faintest chance at ownership. The 1985 penny looks deceptively normal. The copper shine, the Lincoln profile, the memorial reverse, everything about it seems ordinary. But turn it over in the light, study that date, and notice the absence of a mint mark. That's when the realization hits. That's when you understand you might be holding $1 million treasure. Collectors who've made this discovery say it feels like lightning striking twice. One man recalled how he almost spent his lucky penny on a soda, only to realize later it was worth more than his car, his house, and his retirement savings combined. Imagine that, a single coin, nearly forgotten, suddenly becoming the cornerstone of a legacy. But here's the cliffhanger every collector fears: what if you already had one of these and spent it without realizing? What if you handed it over for a stick of gum, or dropped it into a vending machine years ago? That's the haunting thought that keeps people searching, again and again, through jars of coins and drawers stuffed with change. This is why, even today, the 1985 no mint mark penny is one of the most talked about modern rarities in numismatics. Its legend only grows with time. Every auction that surfaces, every whisper of a new discovery, reignites the hunt. And each time, the values climb higher, proving that these million-dollar mistakes are only becoming more desirable. So here's the takeaway. If you own a 1985 Lincoln penny, look closely. Examine the date, and then check the space beneath it. If there's no mint mark, no tiny D, you could be staring at the very coin collectors are willing to pay over $1 million for. Don't ignore it. Don't toss it in with the rest. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. But instead, it changed someone's life forever. Imagine reaching into an old coffee can of pennies, the kind your grandfather might have kept in the garage, and pulling out a coin so ordinary, yet so rare, that collectors would fight over it with bids climbing into the millions. This is the unbelievable story of the 1951 wheat penny without a mint mark, a coin that looks like pocket change, but has stunned the entire coin world with values reaching up to $1.6 million. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. The front shows the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln, worn from circulation, the words, "In God We Trust," etched above his head, and the year 1951 stamped below. No flashy silver, no exotic metal, no gold shimmer. Just a plain, brown copper penny that's been in circulation for decades. But what most people don't realize is that hidden inside this simple coin is a secret that has turned it into a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. So how does a 1951 penny, without even a mint mark, become worth more than a mansion? The answer lies in its rarity, and in the mistakes of history. In 1951, the United States Mint struck hundreds of millions of pennies. Most were minted in Philadelphia, which is why they carry no mint mark at all. These should have been the most common pennies of the era. But in a small batch, a series of minting anomalies and unexpected preservation created a handful of extraordinary survivors, coins struck with sharper dies, on purer copper planchets, or with errors so subtle most people would never notice them. And it's those tiny details that turned an everyday penny into a $1 million miracle. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. Decades later, collectors began noticing that certain 1951 no-mint mark wheat pennies were trading hands for staggering prices. One looked like any other, until you saw the crisp strike, the perfect condition, and the fact that it had never been touched by circulation. Auction houses reported sales so high that even seasoned dealers were shocked. A penny once tossed casually into cash drawers and soda machines was now commanding 6 and even 7 figures. The coin market buzzed with disbelief. How could such a common year suddenly produce one of the most valuable pennies in history? But then the truth began to spread. These were not ordinary pennies. These were the ultra-rare survivors, coins that slipped through time unscathed, hiding in collections and jars until someone stumbled upon them. And the moment they hit the open market, collectors went into a frenzy. Dealers rushed to get their hands on them, and the prices kept climbing. One man, who had been holding on to his father's coin collection for decades, decided to bring his 1951 wheat penny to an appraiser. To his amazement, the coin that had been sitting in a dusty box was valued at over $1 million. In a single moment, a simple family heirloom became a life-changing fortune. Stories like his remind us that treasures often hide in plain sight. We just have to know where to look. But here's the shocking part most people miss. These pennies aren't always dazzling or shiny. Some look worn, others look average. The key is in the details, the strike, the surface, and the subtle errors. A double die obverse, a rare die variety, or even an exceptionally preserved coin with blazing red luster can make the difference between 1 cent and $1 million. And it's so easy to overlook. Imagine holding it in your hand, thinking it's just another penny, only to realize that tiny variations make it one of the rarest coins in America. How many of these are still out there? Could one be sitting in a jar on your dresser? Could it be rattling around in your glove compartment right now? Every time someone sorts through a roll of pennies, every time a coin collection is passed down, there's the chance that one of these elusive 1951 no-mint wheat pennies could appear. And when it does, it's not just a penny anymore. It's a fortune. Collectors today treat this coin with almost mythical respect. Auction rooms grow silent when one is brought out. The bidding starts modestly, but within minutes the numbers skyrocket. Tens of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. And then, in a shocking burst, it passes the $1 million mark. A hush falls over the crowd as the gavel slams down, and just like that, another penny has written its name in history. So how do you know if you have the 1951 wheat penny worth up to $1.6 million? First, check the mint mark. If there is no letter below the date, no D, no S, just a blank space, you're looking at a Philadelphia issue. Then, examine the condition. Brilliant uncirculated examples with full detail are the most valuable. Look for doubling on Lincoln's face, sharpness in the wheat stalks on the reverse, and any signs of unusual luster or planchet errors. Even pennies with slight wear can still bring high prices if the details are rare enough. The difference between pocket change and a fortune could come down to a magnifying glass and a careful eye. Collectors often say, "Don't judge a penny by its shine." And they're right. Because the next time you pick up a 1951 wheat penny without a mint mark, you could be holding a hidden fortune. This exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million. Imagine holding a penny so ordinary, so dull in appearance, that you'd never give it a second glance. Yet beneath that worn copper surface hides a story so rare, so electrifying, that it has shocked the coin world for decades. The 1936 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark is not just a piece of pocket change. For a few lucky collectors, it became a life-changing discovery worth more than $1 million. Now here's the mystery. 1936 was not a year known for rare coins. Over 300 million pennies rolled off the presses in Philadelphia. By all logic, every single one should be common. And yet, a small handful were struck with subtle flaws, nearly invisible to the untrained eye, that turned them into treasures worth a fortune. One of these pennies, tossed aside and forgotten for years, resurfaced in a private collection. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a dark, worn cent from the Great Depression era. But under a magnifying glass, the secret revealed itself. A double strike. The numbers on the date showed faint shadows. The word Liberty had a ghostly twin. This was no ordinary cent, this was a once-in-a-lifetime error. Collectors were shocked. Dealers rushed in. And when it finally reached the auction block, the bidding war was fierce. The hammer dropped at a jaw-dropping price, nearly $1.7 million. One man's pocket change had become $1 million miracle. In 1936, the United States was climbing out of the Great Depression. Money was scarce, every penny mattered. These coins traveled through breadlines, into the hands of workers, into the jars of struggling families. Nobody imagined one of these tiny copper discs could ever be worth more than the paycheck of a lifetime. And yet, here we are. Look closely at the 1936 penny. If it lacks a mint mark beneath the date, that means it was struck in Philadelphia. That's your starting point. But the real money lies in the errors. Some show double dies, especially in the date and inscriptions. Others have off-center strikes or subtle misalignments that make them incredibly rare. And it's those errors, combined with pristine condition, that send collectors into a frenzy. One coin collector, an older gentleman from Ohio, shared his story. He found a 1936 penny in a cigar box that had belonged to his father. He almost gave it away. But curiosity made him check. Under magnification, he spotted the doubling on the date. Weeks later, that same coin paid off his mortgage. Every time a 1936 no-mint mark penny with errors shows up, the price seems to climb higher. Collectors whisper about hidden examples still floating in circulation, waiting to be discovered. Imagine buying a handful of pennies at a yard sale and realizing one of them could change your life forever. Dealers are scrambling. Auctions are heating up. And ordinary people, just like you, are realizing that one small coin could be their ticket to a new future. So here's how to know if your 1936 penny could be worth a fortune. First, check the date, 1936, with no mint mark under it. Next, look for doubling on the numbers, especially the 9 and 6. Tilt the coin under light. If you see a shadow or doubling, you may be holding a treasure. Finally, condition is king. A coin with sharp details, little wear, and strong luster can skyrocket in value. But beware. Millions of these pennies are just ordinary copper cents. The trick is spotting the ones that aren't. If you're not sure, never clean your coin. It can destroy the value instantly. Instead, take it to a trusted dealer or send it to a grading service. That small step could be the difference between pocket change and $1 million. And here's the thought that should keep you up at night. Somewhere in America, sitting in an old coffee can, a dusty drawer, or even in someone's spare change, there could be another one of these coins. Waiting. Hidden. Ready to shock the world all over again. It's valued at over $1 million. A simple copper penny, struck in 1952, that most people ignored, tossed into piggy banks, or used to pay for a stick of gum, has now become one of the most sought-after treasures in American coin history. And the shocking part? It doesn't even carry a mint mark. At first glance, the 1952 no mint mark Lincoln wheat penny looks like nothing special. Millions of them rolled off the presses in Philadelphia. People used them, lost them, forgot them. But hidden among those ordinary coins lies a rare variety so elusive, so valuable, that collectors today whisper its name like a legend. Some have called it the $1,000,000 penny, because when the right one shows up, auctions explode. But how does an ordinary cent from 1952 suddenly command the kind of money that could change your life forever? The answer lies in tiny mistakes, forgotten details, and the power of rarity. Imagine this: a coin that survived over 70 years, passing through countless hands, almost discarded countless times. And then, one day, a collector notices something unusual. A strike that looks slightly different. A detail that shouldn't exist. That discovery is what transformed pocket change into a fortune. Collectors were stunned. Dealers rushed to get their hands on this coin. Stories began circulating about a man who sold one for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then another surfaced, pushing the value into the millions. The coin world was shaken to its core. Because when something this rare comes to light, the competition to own it becomes fierce, even ruthless. But what happened next stunned the entire coin world. A 1952 no mint mark wheat penny crossed the auction block and sold for an unbelievable price, up to $1.8 million. Think about that for a moment. A coin you could have found in loose change, now worth more than most houses. This isn't just history. This is life-changing. The answer is both simple and complex. On the surface, it's just copper. But the truth lies in rarity. Only a tiny handful of these pennies, struck with unique errors and conditions, survived in pristine quality. The U.S. Mint never intended for them to exist this way, yet they slipped through, unnoticed for decades. These rare survivors became legends. And every collector today dreams of finding one. And here's the most unbelievable part: most people miss it. They look at the date, 1952, and shrug. They don't notice the subtle doubling, the crisp strike, the sharp wheat stalks on the reverse that make this coin stand apart. They don't realize that a penny sitting in their drawer, ignored for years, could be worth $1 million. One man's pocket change became $1 million miracle. He found it by chance while sorting old jars of coins left behind by his grandfather. What he thought was just a keepsake turned out to be the discovery of a lifetime. Imagine the shock. Imagine realizing that a penny, something you'd barely notice, could pay off your mortgage, buy you a new car, and leave you with wealth to spare. Collectors are obsessed. They know that these rare 1952 wheat pennies are still out there, hiding in collections, forgotten in old coin rolls, buried in dusty drawers. Dealers are scanning every coin they see. Auctions are buzzing. And ordinary people are checking their change like never before. Because the dream is alive. The dream that you could be the next person to stumble upon one. But here's where it gets even more exciting. The exact features of the 1952 no mint mark wheat penny are what separate a penny worth a cent from a penny worth a fortune. You need to look closely. Examine the date. Some show a doubled strike. Look at the edges, the sharpness of Lincoln's profile, and the clarity of the wheat stalks on the reverse. If the coin is in near-perfect condition, uncirculated, and shows these rare features, you could be holding a life-changing piece of American history. But here's the warning. Many people mistake ordinary 1952 pennies for the rare variety. Condition matters. Tiny details matter. And missing them could mean the difference between a coin worth a penny and a coin worth millions. So here's what you need to do. Check your coin jars. Look through old collections. Pay attention to 1952 wheat pennies without a mint mark. And don't dismiss them too quickly. Because hidden in plain sight could be the discovery that changes your life forever. This is more than just a coin. It's a story of chance, of history, of luck, and of wealth waiting to be unlocked. And the truth is, this exact penny could be sitting in your drawer right now, and it's worth over $1 million.